Attorney Natalie Woodward with us, along with HLN contributor Jason Johnson, our own Mike Brooks. Gene Cassaro is going to be joining us. Also, Lynn Berry, welcome aboard.
Thanks so much. Great to be here, guys.
Yeah, threw you right back into you had to catch up on the trial, boy, minute by minute. All right, so this is pretty compelling stuff. And you and I were talking, Lynn, about the fact that there's one written statement, two audio statements regarding George Zimmerman's story, one on video. Natalie, you brought up there's also the 911 calls. So, Mike, as an investigator, right? I mean, everybody's trying to look at all these moments of testimony and see if it all matches up. There's a lot of comparison to do.
One of the things in all the cases we cover, we look for inconsistencies in the different statements that the defendant gives. And I tell you, right from the very, very beginning, I thought his stories all sort of match up. And, you know, he's been very, very consistent. You listen to the audio, and let me just point out, Doris Singleton, when she got there, she was called in. She was off duty. She got called in. George Zimmerman was already at this police station. She came in, and the interview room where she was talking to him, it's set up for video, but she didn't know how to operate the video.
Okay, here's where I think this is really bizarre, and this is where I turn to you, Jason, because wouldn't you think? I mean, she obviously didn't know how big this was going to go, probably, right? I mean, the world's watching this trial.
Sure.
But wouldn't you take a few moments to go down the hallway and find somebody and say, help me out, got to get this on video?
Yeah. This is what we call due diligence. These are the kinds of things that the prosecution is going to come forward and say, look, this reflects a lack of effort, a lack of concern. Did they really pay attention to this case? She might have, look, I'm not going to impugn her character. Maybe she was just tired. She had been called off duty, but maybe she didn't consider it as important because of who Trayvon Martin was. But that's a key thing, to not record someone who's in there having just shot someone.
So you hear it, but when you see the video, we all know, as watching the Jodi Arias trial, she's doing headstands, she's singing, she's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Let me ask you, as an attorney and also an investigator, okay, how video could have added to this?
Well, we see him come in from the time that they pull into the Sally Port at the police station, and you see George Zimmerman get out of the car, the police car. You see him come in, you see him walk through the station, and you see him going to the interview room.
And that's it.
And that's it. And now we see, you know, we hear his statement, but we're not seeing what his body language is like, you know, how he was relating to the investigator.
How about the fact if he was dirty, bloody? We only saw pictures later on of the cuts on the head.
This would have been much more typically an upfront, you know, scale. They would have been able to turn him around, see the places on his head that he was complaining of. You know, you're missing all of that.
If he was your client, would you say, listen, it's their fault. You should have been able to see my client was bloodied here. He pointed that out. He wasn't twitching. He wasn't moving around and seeming nervous.
Well, you're going to want to say that any questions that you have about this goes to the defense favor. You know, because the prosecution has to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. So if there are questions in your mind, if there's inconsistencies, that's all I need. I just need that.
Reasonable doubt.
A little bit of reasonable doubt with at least one juror.
Let's listen to a little bit more of that audio statement as we were following Officer Doris Singleton there on the stand.
I had called before the police had come out, but these guys know the neighborhood very well. They would cut in between buildings and loot.
You're saying these guys? Who are these guys?
The people committing the burglaries.
So you've seen more than one person, like, looking suspicious and doing these burglaries?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you never had seen this guy prior to tonight, or you don't know?
Okay, what stands out?
These guys. You know,
These guys.
Yeah, he had already made his mind up who this was. So he wasn't calling, reporting someone who was potentially an issue. He was calling, reporting someone he had already made a conclusion about.
So already assuming this was one of the guys that was breaking into homes.
But is the defense going to claim that that's because he had made 4 previous calls before this about run-ins in his neighborhood, that he was concerned, and that was why he referred to
But he
these
still writes
guys?
him as a suspect. And again, if the prosecution's case is that this guy was profiled from the very beginning, and George Zimmerman came out just absolutely aggressively knowing this is the guy who's not going to get away. So I think that word in particular is going to come into play.
But George Zimmerman,
and he's a criminal justice major also.
Right, not a good one.
There you go.
But
we don't know how his grades were. Come on.
Yes, we do. They're bad.
It follows his version, though. I mean, whether or not we agree with his version or not is different than whether or not that was really the perception he was operating under. He really felt like this was someone to be afraid of. He felt like this was someone who was a risk.
Right, exactly.
And right now we are waiting for Serino, that lead homicide investigator to take the stand. We're going to be following that gavel to gavel of the Zimmerman coverage. You'll see it all here on HLN. But first, Lynn, we want to get folks caught up on some other stories that happened. These firefighters, 19 of them losing their lives.
Yeah, what a tragedy. This is really pulling at the hearts of everyone all across the country. 19 firefighters from an elite team whose job was to get as close to a wildfire as possible. They all died on the job in Arizona. Now, here are the details that we know. They're from Prescott Fire Department. They were fighting the Yarnell Hill Fire. That's northwest of Phoenix. Now, they were supposed to go in first. They're the guys, they clear out the vegetation. They stop the flames from advancing. But something went terribly wrong. Some of those 19 elite firefighters were actually found in these emergency shelters. Those are what they used to deploy. They possibly could protect themselves. Well, it didn't do that. All 19 losing their lives. Yesterday actually marked the worst loss of firefighters' lives in a wildfire. That's since 1933. Now, this fire is still blazing out of control. It's expected to destroy about half of the 500 homes in the town of Yarnell. It has already burned more than 6,000 acres. But, you know, these guys, they go in there. They are trained for the most difficult of situations.
These were the hot shots, Mike,
yeah, they were the Granite Mountain Hot Shots, team of 19 men and women. And, you know, we talk about the shelters. If you see sometimes during a wildland fire, you'll see that they have some of their protective gear. Well, they have a pack. And if they get caught in a situation like this, they deploy it and pull it over them in hopes that the fire will blow over them. But it didn't. I was hearing from some of my fire department friends in Phoenix, in that area, that they were apparently trying to clear out some of that vegetation, and they were cutting a fire stop. Well, they got surrounded by fire and got caught in a flashover. That's when everything around them just ignites.
An unexpected wind that came right
and
over
so they were just basically caught, and some of them were found in those shelters. So sad.
We won't forget those 19 firefighters.
Absolutely
That's for sure.
not.
We'll continue to lift them up, talk about that story, and continue following every single second of the George Zimmerman murder trial right here on HLN.